хто мав терпіння почекати сьогодні через те, що в нас було технічне неполагодження, дуже дякую. Отче Богдане, вітаю вас. Glory be to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.
I would like to apologize and thank everybody for your patience due to some of our technical difficulties. And first of all, I would like to thank Father Bohdan for his patience, was waiting for me to figure out how to do those things. I hope that this is the last time we have those problems. Welcome, Otche Bohdane.
Yeah.
I was looking forward to this presentation for a long time, and I promised and ask our people to turn in tonight because it is something that we don't talk very often. Я почнемо, Отче, з молитви, і тоді ви зразу розпочинаєте про цю тему. Добре? Ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа, амінь. Ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа, амінь. Ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа, амінь. Царю Небесний, утішителю душі істини, що всюди єси і все наповняєш, скарби добра і життя подателю. Прийди і вселися в нас, і очисти нас від усякої скверни, і спаси благі душі наші. Слава Отцю і Сину Святому Духу, нині повсякчас на віки вічні, амінь. Господи помилуй, Господи помилуй, Господи помилуй. Отче, благослови.
Христос. Зустріч, мир, єдність і поможи нам дожити до кінця цієї пандемії і у всьому славити Пресвятому Твоєму імені. Амінь.
Амінь. Ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа, амінь. Ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа, амінь. Ім'я Отця і Сина Святого Духа, амінь. Отже, дякую вам ще раз, що ви завітали до нас. Прошу, скажіть нам пару слів з такої мудрості.
Окей. Мені сказали, що тема це є про утримання церкви, жертовність, так далі, так далі. Хочете чи по-українському, чи по-англійському?
По-англійському, будь ласка.
Добре. So I'm going to start by reading the epistle that we're all going to hear in church this coming Sunday. But this I say, he who sows bountifully will also give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound toward you, that you always having all sufficiency in all things may have an abundance for every good work. As it is written, he has dispersed abroad, he has given to the poor, his righteousness endures forever. Now may he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food, supply and multiply the seed you have sown, and increase the fruits of your righteousness, while you are enriched in everything for all liberality, which causes thanksgiving through us to God. So that's St. Paul writing to the Corinthians, and it's very apropos that we read this on the Saturday before Thanksgiving here in Canada. And these are words that are very important. Tonight's theme is about support for the church, giving, etc., etc. And so I wanted to start off just by telling you the story of our parish here, St. John's in Oshawa. When I first came here in 2008, there was a big hall and a church. And the hall took up a lot of time of a lot of the parishioners. And they used to have weddings and do catering and parties, and then every Thursday they had Ukrainian food sales where people would come in and eat or take out. So there would be usually 2 to 3 days a week where people were in the hall, and they liked it very much. It was very nice from a social perspective and all that. But one of the first questions I asked when I came here was, is the church or is the church supporting the hall? And because the utilities and all things were all tied up together, basically coming out of the same meter, it was difficult to find that out. But the best we could do in trying to track down everything and figure it out was to say that at best, the hall was supporting the hall and the church was supporting the church. And if there was an imbalance, it was from the standpoint of the church actually supporting the hall. So That went on for 3 years, and in 2011, we found out that there were structural problems with the hall. We had to close it because as soon as you hear about stuff like that, you are liable if something happens. So we had to close the hall. October of 2011, it was closed, and then we had to decide what we're going to do. Are we going to tear it down and build a new one? Are we going to renovate? You know, what options are there? Pick up and move, go somewhere else. And many of our parishioners at that time thought that this was the end of the parish. Without food sales, the parish is going to die. We're not going to have money, and that's it. And besides that, there was also a process of just grieving for the hall, because that hall had been our first church from 1935 until we built the temple. And, you know, everybody had been married and had funeral luncheons and all kinds of parties and affairs there. So there was a period of grieving, but many people thought that we were going to just have to fold up for lack of money. But as it turns out, that hall being closed was probably the best thing that ever happened to the parish here. What happened was it forced us to realize that, you know, there was, no way to do fundraising, food sales, and things like that. So the people had to step up and donate, which thank God they did. We have a very good parish council. The council president, Dr. Paul Slavchenko, is a good friend with the man who is the director of stewardship development for the Anglican Archdiocese in Toronto. So, he helped us, and we instituted this, what they call the PAR program, pre-authorized remittances, so that people could, sign up like you sign up to pay your car payment or your mortgage payment, and every month, it comes out. And successful program. At the present time, we have over 5,500 a month that comes in through the PAR program. And then we had to decide what we're going to do with the new hall. And so we originally decided that we were going to renovate under the church and make that into a hall. We were told then maybe that's not the best idea. We can make a hall a church, and that would be better because it's more certain, Anyway, to make a long story short, if you ever deal with architects, make sure that you deal with an architect who knows what things cost. If you ever deal with contractors, make sure you have contractors that will give you a realistic picture of what things are like. And we were very blessed because we have a wonderful contractor, and we were able to build a hall. We originally went to raise $400,000. That was in 2014, which we did. But right now the hall costs about $800,000, and we have just about paid it off because the decision of the council was that we were not going to build anything until we had the money we needed. And so what went from a $400,000, hall that we were going to build ended up being like around 800,000. But at this present moment, we have almost all that money in the bank. So the council and the parishioners were very adamant. We didn't want to build and then ask for money like many people told us we should do, but rather we gathered the money in advance, and things have worked out very well. So between those two things, and again, it was Paul's friend Peter who helped us with that fundraising campaign. So a little parish, we have, I think at the present moment, 106 dues paying members. I've got 120 families on my mail list, right? We've been able to keep our head above water, and we've been able to actually build a new hall without doing any appreciable fundraising. We have this folklore festival every June, well, not this past June, but every June, called Fiesta here, where we have a pavilion, which we have a host up at the Legion now, which brings in maybe a couple, $2,000-$3,000. That's it. From our fundraising campaign for the hall, we had a $15,000 donation from the Ukrainian Credit Union, had a $15,000 donation from one of our local funeral homes. But other than that, it was all our people, you know? So I think the message there is that money is there, okay? And so when you hear parishes complaining about we don't have money, people don't give, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you really have to ask yourself, well, where's the problem, you know? And especially now with COVID, because, you know, our parish since March, you know, thank God, I just told the people this past Sunday because it's been 6.5 months, than it did in the same 6 months last year. So, as I had written to them in July yet, you know, the government offers these programs to help nonprofits and churches, right, with the wages and all of that. But you know, churches receive a tax benefit when people give donations. You know, we can offer receipts. You know, so that the state, the government authorities already help to support the church. And so honestly, when we have a crisis like this, when many people are suffering, you know, people have lost their jobs, people have lost their businesses, etc. People have lost their health. And so the government is doing what it can to ameliorate all these negative consequences. Well, as a church, I don't know, is it right for us to be taking money from the government that might better or be more needed for people like that who are in dire Today, I can tell you with very great joy and great gratitude to God that our hall, it's not quite open because of COVID. You know, it wasn't finished on time. It was supposed to be finished this past summer, but you know, certain trades stopped working, etc. So in essence, the entire hall is done. We're just waiting for the hood of the range to be taken care of. By the end of this month, we should take possession. We may owe, who knows, maybe $30,000, $40,000. Okay, so and we've been balancing the books, a little bit in the red, a little bit in the black, but basically balancing the books every year since 2011 when we closed the old hall. So that's what can be done by a small parish without fundraising. Okay, so that's just point number one. Okay. So the question then becomes, how should a parish be financed? Now, if we were in the old country or in a couple of Eastern European countries now, it would be the emperor or the king or the government who paid for, you know, like in Greece, the churches they're owned by the state, priests have their wages paid by the state, etc. That's very rare anymore. We don't have a Tsar, you know, we don't have a king. And most places in the world, it is incumbent upon the parishioners themselves to cover the costs of the upkeep and the running of the parish. And so we basically run the church on the donations of the faithful. When we talk about this, we really do have to ask the question, well, my mortgage, who pays for my food? Who pays for my car? Who pays for my insurance? And all these things we do. You know, it's out of our own pocket, out of the money that we've been able to acquire due to the energy and experience and education and talent and expertise and initiative that God has given us. And so why would we expect that someone else should pay for our church, should pay the wages of our priest, etc., etc.? You know, we take responsibility for all those other things in our life. Why is it that we would say, well, you know, we're going to make pierogies so that, you know, chujis, the non-Ukrainians, the non-members can, you know, pay for the church. So we'll get back to that. But the point there is that we are supposed to be responsible financially in all aspects of our life. And why should the church be different? The interesting point is that according to American sources, I'm sure the Canadian sources the Canadian reality would be the same, but the statistical data in America indicates that the Orthodox are the richest, the most well-off per capita among all the Christian groups, more than the Catholics, more than any of the Protestants. The Orthodox are the richest per capita. And I mean, many of you heard, I'm sure, about the donation that the Temerties made, $250 million to the University of Toronto Faculty of Medicine. Okay, that's a Ukrainian Orthodox guy from our cathedral in Toronto, right? And so, you know, we have some high-powered people even here in Canada, right? And you know, there are lots of them. Believe me, there's a funny story about the priest that gets up in at the pulpit and says, you know, good people, I have good news and bad news for you. The good news is that our news is that it's all in your thoughts. So that's really a reality here. So whenever you hear of parishes or parishioners or priests complaining, oh, there's no money, you really have to ask what's going on there. And so the question is, why do people not give? Okay. Now there can be many reasons. Often there's a lack of trust. You see people in leadership positions in the metropolia, in the parish, who are very fiscally irresponsible, who don't seem to be able to balance a checkbook or anything else. Well, of course, why would you give money to people like that? So there's an issue of trust. Not everybody is that way. Some people are, and it's like anything else in life. We have to be cognizant of those realities and be responsible with our own money, both as individuals and as parishes. The other might be simply indifference. You know, indifference to what? To the mission of the church. And so this is an important foundational question, and this sort of underlies everything, is really, what is the mission? What is the core business of the church? Okay? Most people, if you asked to articulate it, really couldn't tell you. You know, I think the best you would get most cases is, oh, there has to be a church. Well, we need a church. But you ask, you know, why? What's the core business? Difficult to pull that out of people sometimes. Okay. For others, they don't give because they're simply they don't have a sense of responsibility. You know, the church is something that somebody else can look after. And when I need it for a wedding or for a funeral or whatever, then, you know, have my Easter food blessed. Okay, I'll go and I'll show up. But, you know, I don't need to take responsibility. Somebody else will do it, right? Lack of commitment, you know. And then it's a very interesting reason why people don't give. Often it's because they are not asked. Simply, they're not asked. How much do we talk about money in the church? And you know, money is a real hot button issue for many people. It's very funny, you know. I'm going to suggest 2 books that, if you're interested in this more, you should read both of them. One of them is by the very famous author Henri Nouwen. Okay, beautiful author. All of his books are great. It's called The Spirituality of Fundraising. Okay, and it's a short book. It's more geared towards fundraising in particular, so there's more of a sort of a particular goal involved. But the biblical, practical teaching there is really, really good. The other is by a Ukrainian Orthodox priest from Charlottesville, Virginia, Father Robert Hollett. He spoke at our diocesan conference about 5 years ago. And it's called The First and the Finest. And the Stewardship offering. And as I say, he's a priest of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the USA. And he did this. This is from his Doctor of Ministry project that he had to do. And he's also the Director of Stewardship for the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the USA. Excellent, excellent book. And if you ever want somebody to come up to talk to your parish about this, he's the guy. Okay, St. Nicholas Church, Charlottesville, Virginia. Okay, those two books are really excellent resources where you see a rationale as well as a program for how giving should look, how support should look in any parish. And so we come to the question of general principles, okay? What are the general principles for how we should give to the church? And we can say four things. If we mentions today in that epistle, we'll hear it again on Sunday. If you didn't listen earlier, you'll hear it Sunday, that we should give freely, okay? There's no coercion. There's no coercion towards anybody. People are to give freely, okay? As we have decided in our hearts, as St. Paul says. So this is a serious thing. We have to take it seriously. We have to look at this question prayerfully, okay? We have to give joyfully. This is the second one. After freely, we give joyfully. This isn't, again, it's not being coerced. There's no guilt trips. It's nothing like that. When we give, we're glad to give. Why? Well, it's like our council president says, you know, God gave me a brain, God gave me the education, God gave me the ability to have this wonderful job I have where I can make this money. And so it's my duty to give back. Okay. So we give joyfully with thankfulness, as St. Paul says. Thirdly, we give sacrificially. And this is very important because, you know, if you throw a couple of bucks in the plate, you know, you can't even get a coffee at Starbucks for a couple of bucks, right? You know, God doesn't need our chump change, right? If we take it seriously, you know, we have to go to a nice restaurant. We're not going to pay 20 bucks at, you know, Swiss Chalet. We're going to go for 150 bucks at the Keg, right? Things like that. Oh, especially when our friends are going to either hear about it or if we're taking them out, you know, we want to make sure we impress people, right? Well, how do we share the goods God given us, the money God has given us with God? Do we have that same concern, you know, to be generous? Okay. What that means is that we should feel it. You know, C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity talks about how for the almsgiving, and this he's talking more about support for the poor, but the principle still applies. He says that if we do not feel squeezed by our charitable giving, in the sense that other people of our acquaintanceship who have more or less the same standard of living, if we can't do all the things that they do because of our charitable giving, he says that's probably a good indication that we're on the right track. Because, you know, I'll tell you once, years ago, okay, the guy that did my taxes, we were talking, he had done the taxes and he was looking after financial stuff, and he said, so tell me, you know, like financially, what would you like to do? What do you want to do? I said, well, you know, if I was able to do it, you know, I'd love to go to Greece for 2-3 weeks every year. And he said, okay. I said, but, you know, I don't have the money. He said, well, you know, do you want to find the money? And I said, well, I mean, how? And he points to my charitable giving on my tax return and says, right there. Well, that was not an option, right? So that's, you know, that's the kind of thing. We should feel a little bit squeezed, right? That if people who are making more or less the same amount of money that we are, if we're not able to do everything or have everything that they have because of our charitable giving, that's a good sign. And we should, you know, thank God for that. So we give freely, we give joyfully, we give sacrificially, and we give proportionally. And this last one is very important, okay? The next little paragraph we're going to talk about has to do with the models of support. And one is, of course, dues, and the other is stewardship. Now, if you think of that dues model, everybody who wants to be a member of the parish pays 150 bucks a year, and you're all a member. Well, that's not right, okay? I have little elderly Ukrainian men and women on fixed incomes whose fixed incomes are much less than, and what I or my wife or anybody else in the parish makes, right? They shouldn't be giving the same amount of money to the church as a rule as the person who's got a job with 100 or 150,000 a year salary. So proportionally means by percentage wise. And again, to come back to Peter, the director of stewardship development for the Archdiocese, Anglican Archdiocese of Toronto, and this is a model that we've taken, they have found that if everyone in the parish gives 2.5% of their income off the top for the parish, then the parishes are financially healthy. They're able to do what they need to do, okay? Able to pay the bills, etc., okay? So we suggest 2.5% of a person's income as the reasonable amount to start with. The biblical norm, of course, from the Old Testament, we have tithing, right? Giving 10% off the top. Some people do that. Some groups, like Mormons and some evangelical groups, require that, right? They require 10% off the top. And people do it, so it's possible to do, right? But I remember years and years ago, I think I was still in high school, actually. I was reading an article in Reader's Digest. And they were talking about this charitable giving, and one of the people they interviewed was a Roman Catholic bishop, and he said that he gives 10%, he gives 5% to the church, and 5% to other charitable causes, that he supports within the community, etc. Could be a soup kitchen, anything like that, right? So I thought that was a very good model, because we know that in the Old Testament times and up until the 20th century, when we had state churches, that the charitable giving of the faithful often was not directed towards the parish itself for ongoing, operational costs, because that was covered by the government, but it was given for the poor, right? So that people would help the poor. That's why, like, the women's organizations at the Greek parishes are called philoptokos. Ptochi are the poor, right? And philia, of course, is friendship, like friends of the poor. That the women's organization existed to help the poor people, within the community, within the parish, etc. And so that's a really important thing. And so for us, if we were set up to do so, and it would be a wonderful thing if we could do it, people would give their 10% or whatever to the parish, and the parish in their budget would put 10% aside to help, the poor, the marginalized, etc., right? But if we don't have that work going on in our parishes, and I don't know of any of our parishes that do that, then we give our 2.5%. If we can give more, we give more, right? To the parish, but then we also oblige, and very, very important. I'm going to read a little passage, one paragraph from Henri Nouwen's book about the spirituality of fundraising. He says, "The Bible is unambiguous about God's concern for the poor. Since there will never cease to be some in need on the earth, I therefore command you, open your hand to the poor and needy neighbor in your land." And that's from Deuteronomy and from Isaiah. "From its birth, the church has recognized the privileged place of the poor in God's sight. Listen, my beloved brothers and sisters, has not God chosen the poor in this world to be rich in faith and to be heirs of the kingdom that he has promised to those who love him? Indeed, the poor and suffering remind us that the Son of God became poor for our sake. God loves the poor, and so do those who follow Christ. In loving and serving the poor, we have the beautiful opportunity to love and to serve Jesus. In to one of least these brothers of mine, you did it to me. And so that's a very important thing. So when we give freely, joyfully, sacrificially, and proportionally, and we give and to the parish and for the needs of the poor, the marginalized, etc. Our parishes generally, when they were formed, took on a Protestant model of church support, which involved dues. And the dues model, I pay X amount of dollars per year and I'm, a member, it objectively does not work. Okay, it does not work. In a best case scenario, it is not optimal. Okay, so most churches throughout the North America, at least, I can't speak to anything other than Canada and United States, but most churches that are doing well financially are doing well because they've gone to what is called a stewardship model. And that model can have a couple of different variations. Again, for your own circumstances, if you're interested in serious about doing this, I'd call Father Hollett and have him come up and talk to you, okay? But it can be in terms of a percentage, like we mentioned here. We suggest 2.5% as a start, right? People can give more. People can give less because, as St. Paul says in the epistle, it's what's from in our hearts, right? But if we give proportionally and sacrificially, things will always be fine in the parish. And so in some churches, like in the Greek Archdiocese in the States, they have what they call their stewardship program, where every family in November, usually, what they call the stewardship unit, which could they would write down name, address, how much they're planning to give for the coming year. This is not a contract where anyone's going to come after them and say, well, you said you're giving 10,000 and it's December, we only have 8,000, you owe us 2,000. That doesn't happen. It's simply that the people say, this is what I'm planning to give to the coming year. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, right? This year with the whole COVID thing, I'm sure things went, crazy in many places, right? But when the family or that individual makes that pledge, it is trusted that they are going to do their best to fulfill it. And the parish then can make up their budget on the basis of that. Everybody knows more or less what it costs to run the parish. If you have a parish council, one of their jobs is to make a budget, and one of their jobs is to communicate the needs of the parish to the membership, and that includes financial needs, and that includes the priest. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the priest talking about money. He should talk in the proper way, of course, but he is the mouthpiece in church for the council, right? And out of church too, actually. But everybody has to be on the same page, and the priest and the council must lead by example. They must lead by example. If you have a bishop in his diocese who never gives a blessed cent to the church, if you have a priest in the parish who never gives a blessed cent to the parish, you got big problems, okay? You got big problems. Just like if you have a parish council member who, wants to run things and control things and never gives a blessed cent, okay? That can't happen. That cannot happen. Okay, so we have to lead by example, and that begins with the bishops, with the priests, and with the council members. Okay, and then that stewardship, again, it's free, it's joyful, it's sacrificial, and it's proportional, and everything is fine. So that is the model that if we're looking to have parishes which are financially healthy, that's the model we have to go to. Okay, this begs a question though. What is membership? When you say the members, what is something that we can talk theologically about corporately? Okay, theologically, if you're baptized, chrismated, you attend the services, you believe what the church teaches, you conduct your life in accordance with the moral precepts of the church, etc., you are a member of the church, broadly construed, right? For the purposes of this, again, churches we are incorporated, right? We have registration with the Canadian Revenue Agency, etc., we have to know who has the right to vote at meetings, who has the right to serve on parish councils, etc. And what needs to happen is there has to be a way to determine exactly who can vote, who can serve on the council, etc., who is a member in the sense of being member of a corporate civil body in Canada. Now, the dues model is useful for that purpose, okay? You pay your $150, you're a member, okay? But in a stewardship model, you could use the same thing and say, anyone who basically declares, having fulfilled all of the spiritual requirements, baptism, etc., anyone declares their desire to be a member of this parish and supports the parish according to their means and conscience, which for some person might mean, $10,000 a year, and for another person might mean $100 a year. You can identify membership, describe membership in those terms, and so it can be done. You can have membership without having a dues-based system, okay? And that can easily be done. And so we're winding down now, so we'll be able to take some questions in about a few minutes. But in the end, I just want to offer a thought. We ask people for money, okay? Hopefully, as clergy and as council members and as leaders within the community, we have we are regarded as being people of integrity who are worthy of the trust which is put in us by those who are willing to give their hard-earned money for the parish or for the church, right? And sometimes you hear people ask the question, well, what do I get for it? It's this, well, it's a quid pro quo. It's, I give you this so that I can get that, right? And we understand, of course, that in terms of the church itself, our relationship with God, that really isn't a very useful paradigm, right? But it is true that in giving to the church, we will receive, something or things in return. We receive return, okay, not in the sense of the Holy Eucharist, although that's true too. If we don't have a church, we can still serve the liturgy in somebody's living room, but it's probably not going to be as regular and as comfortable as it might be otherwise. So, but there's communion, the communion of the community, okay? So that's really important. We have connection. We have connection with people, and that connection is not just vertical, it's horizontal too. It's vertical in the sense that we have connection with those who will come after us, those who have been here before us, and those who are here on either side of us with us, going through this life of a particular Christian community. Because we remember, because of people who were here before us, who were very sacrificial in their work and in their giving, we have our job, better than you found them, right? That when we leave mortal coil, that the parish that I belong to is in better shape spiritually, communally, morally, financially, in every way, shape, and form, right? That my kids, my grandkids, right, will have a better parish than I had. That's the goal. And we do that with the people on either side of us. So, we have that cross where what's in front, what's behind, what to either side of us, okay? That connection with all those people, some of whom we know, most of whom we don't know, it's nevertheless there, okay? We receive meaning, okay? I mean, what's life for? If life really is simply the result of chance, encounters between atoms. Okay, if this is all just chance, as certain ideologies and certain, scientific theories would propose, what of it? Big deal, right? So we see the church as being the bearer of meaning. It gives meaning to life in general. It gives meaning to our life. It gives meaning to everything on this earth. And so in supporting the church, we are really contributing to the cherishing, to the support of the idea of meaning in creation, okay? And also truth. Nowadays truth claims, you will find people just, any absolute truth claims, you really have to worry about them. Well, in one sense, that's true, because if you have an absolute truth claim where everything has to be subsumed to that truth claim, and if that truth claim makes you willing to fly planes into skyscrapers, yeah, there's something wrong with that, okay? But just because, the old Latin proverb is that the abuse of something does not forbid its correct use, right? So just because something can be misused doesn't mean that it can't be used properly. And from the standpoint of truth, we would say, yes, we believe, what does Jesus say? I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life, right? So in believing in Jesus, we believe in the truth, and the truth in our lives, knowing the truth, is extremely important, okay, for people. It's not just, life isn't just one big whatever, okay? And if it is, somebody better tell me, because I'm wasting a lot of time. Anyway, I want to leave you with a quote from Henri Nouwen. Asking people for money is giving them the opportunity to put their resources at the disposal of the kingdom. To raise funds is to offer people the chance to invest what they have in the work of God. Whether they have much or little is not as important as the possibility of making their money available to God. When Jesus fed 5,000 people with only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, he was showing us how God's love can multiply the effects of our generosity. God's kingdom is the place of abundance, where every generous act overflows its original bounds and becomes part of the unbounded grace of God at work in the world. So I'll leave you with that. And again, there's lots of stuff we can talk about, lots of different aspects, but I think that's probably enough for right now. So if there are any questions, Father, we can deal with them.
Oops. Sorry, Ocha. That's the way it's supposed to be done. I'm having that software for a while and still not fluent in its usage. I wanted to thank you for that wonderful presentation. If people have questions, please ask. But if not, I wanted to also specifically thank you for putting the idea of stewardship or financial stewardship in a proper perspective. We do on a parish level, I guess in many parishes, and ourselves, we need to ask a question: what do we exist for as a parish? Do we exist for ourselves and try to survive only for now, and then who knows what's going to happen next? Or do we try to pass it on to the next generations, like you were saying, Father? Leave it for the next generation better than what we found. So that's a good perspective. Oche, yeah, I was, you also had touched upon a very good topic about people saying, well, I do not want to give because it's going to be misused, not properly used, or not put in a proper fund and stuff like that. And you hear it quite often, and I thought it was only in our parishes, in Orthodox parishes, but you go and you hear that in different churches. But talking particularly about ourselves, what would your suggestion be for those who are skeptical, about the giving?
Well, number one, if you are active in your parish, you're going to know what's going on, and God willing, that will give you, some confidence that money isn't being squandered. the the biblical precept that by the fruit you know the tree, right? Okay, so when you see any type of organization or group where there's financial problems, now some of those problems can simply be the result. I mean, COVID hits and restaurants start to go under, right? You can totally understand that, which is a good reason to go to a restaurant if you feel comfortable doing so and things like that, to try to support them, right? That's not money poorly spent. That's in one sense almost charitable giving, right? Because you're trying to support people. But if you see an organization, or a parish or a diocese where the money just seems to be squandered, well, if you're a reasonable person, you're going to say, I don't want the money squandered. That doesn't mean you don't give. What that means is you find a parish or a charitable organization that you feel comfortable with, and you give your money there, right? Because in essence, God doesn't care, right? And God doesn't even care if you give your money away and it's squandered, because once you give it, you get the blessing, right? But you do have a responsibility to be, um, how do you say, to share our gifts where they're not going to be squandered, right? It's funny, just I think yesterday morning or this morning, I can't remember, the prologue, there's the story of St. Peter the Merciful from Alexandria, who when he was going along, and there was a shipwreck, and a guy ended up on the shore with nothing, and and later in the market, he sees his toga, up for sale, and he's very upset because he gave it to this guy that had nothing, and the guy sold it. And then that night he has a dream, and God says, Peter, why are you upset? And he says, well, Lord, I gave that guy my toga, and he went and sold it in the bazaar. He says, Peter, look what am I wearing? He says, well, that's my toga. He says, yes, you gave it to him, and I accepted it from you. And that's the kind of thing we have to keep in mind. So those are sort of the two poles, and it's the same if somebody asks you for a buck for coffee on the street corner, whatever. If you give, you get the blessing, right? But by the same token, we have to try to be as responsible as possible, because again, we're going to be called to account for everything we've done. And if I'm throwing money away, whether that's throwing money away, on a bad charity or whatever, or if that's throwing money away just on trinkets that we have around. How many coffee cups do I need, right? If I have 10 coffee cups, okay, that's fine. Why should I buy another one? I can't drink 10 cups of coffee at the same time, right? So all these little things, we are so rich, and we have to be responsible for how we're spending our money, not just in our charitable giving, but in general as well.
Absolutely. And Vasil Kobriz has a question here. I think many people have said to me that what do I get in return to my members' fee? All people are going to be baptized in the church. No one is going to be left out. And I understand it is not an appropriate question in the church, but what is the correct answer?
He gave the right answer. I mean, when somebody asks a question like that, the only response you can say is, well, that's not the right question. And then usually they'll be a bit confused, right? And then you have to think, well, what is the right question? Well, the right question, first of all, is what is the church? Okay? What is the church? Is the church, someplace like McDonald's where I can drive up to the window and say, give me this and I'll give you that, and I'm on my way? Or is the church a community of people where everybody loves each other and supports each other and tries to work for the glory of God? Is the church, like St. Paul says over and over again, the body of Christ? Is the church, the place where Christ is most fully present in the world? If the church is, that's not a good way of saying it. If you appreciate the fact that the church is the body of Christ, that the church is the place where you can most fully, in every sense of the word, enter into a relationship with God through Christ in the Holy Spirit, you're not going to be talking about membership fees. Okay, it's a non sequitur. Okay, so you're really dealing, if you want to talk on a very superficial level, go ahead, have fun, but we're talking about the deepest realities of existence in this universe. Okay, the relationship of the human being to God, right? And so to limit it, to just look at it in terms of a membership fee, it almost sounds sacrilegious. You know what I mean? That's my response. Okay.
Well, what I also wanted to add that when you wrote the Forvisnik, when such a newspaper had existed and had some original materials, you had this. I remember at that point of time, the church membership that you paid the consistory was like $72 or $75, and you wrote that article. I remember 70 ways of 70 good different things you get for the membership fee.
Yeah.
And truly, the office of the consistory was doing some service, and providing some service, and we had definitely felt it. That's one thing, and the second thing is that when we are in the parishes right now, and talking about those membership dues, you almost always get this, what do I get for those $160 or $150 that I pay? You just point out to them, like you were saying superficially, saying, well, $160, some people paying membership at the golf course, they're at $2,000-$3,000 a year without even blinking of an eye, So is that a lot of money to pay for the membership? I don't know, but the church needs to be sustained,
Why would a person feel that it's a good investment? It's worthwhile to pay $2,000 or $3,000 to belong to a country club, and it's not a good investment to pay $150 to belong to a parish.
It's a question of the parish, right?
Well, it could be a question of the person, but it could be a question of the parish, right? Exactly. So you have to ask yourself that question. Okay, the parish should be a place that people want to, should be a community that people want to belong to, right? We have to admit that all kinds of pressures from outside of the church, societal pressures, cultural pressures which are manifested in popular culture, etc., that drive people away from religion in general, the church in particular, Christianity really in particular, right? Okay?
Yeah.
That all of those pressures are out there. And so at some point, you could say that a person, just because of the fact that they were born and raised in Canada in the 21st century, that the default position is going to be not to belong to a parish, not to go to church, which is the opposite it was 100 years ago. 100 years ago, the default position was you belong to a church, you went to church. Now the default is absolutely the opposite. So that's just that reality. But when we get to the point where we have people who consider themselves to be Orthodox Christians, sometimes even pious Orthodox Christians, who are asking these questions, then you really have to ask, well, why is that? Now, it may be that the person is just deluded. Maybe the person just, doesn't care. But it may be that the parish / priest / bishop / diocese / consistory / parish council to make these people think and money than the golf courses. So that's why we have to take responsibility, all of us, every single one of us. We have to take responsibility. Yeah.
it's almost a switched perspective, you know. It's the what do I get for this money, you know, versus given something cheerfully from what you had received, basically, from what God had provided.
Yeah, well, it's a consumer society, you know, consumer culture. And again, if you don't read the Bible and don't go to church and don't hear sermons and don't listen to YouTube presentations on Tuesday night, right? Your default position is going to be, it's a consumer society. So I will call Father when Baba dies so he can do a funeral.
Or baptism.
Please, Father, don't think that I'm going to go to church. I mean, it's the summer and it's the cottage, right? So if that's the attitude people have, well, what do? You know, you can only work with what you got, right? But you can also ask the question, what if I do take that attitude? What is it that I am missing in life? In one sense, our best friends are the Babi and Jide that will be in church come hell or high water, even if they have to crawl up the steps on all fours. And sometimes we don't take the opportunity to ask them, or to ask them to tell the young people, why is it that they have such love for the parish, the church, for God, for Christ, for the community, etc. You know, there was a very interesting thing. I was down at St. Vladimir Seminary in January for the Shmeman lectures, and Bishop Michael from New York was giving a talk, and he was talking about the parents who came over from the old countries, wherever they would be, and then raised their kids in, you know, United States and Canada. And he made a very interesting comment about this dynamic of, you know, the first generation being very dedicated to the church. He said, the parents to give the children what they themselves did not have, but they weren't able to give the children what they did have. Okay, the parents wanted to give the children what the parents didn't have, but they didn't give the kids what they did have, you know. And so that's a really important thing for us. If we do really see the church as the most beautiful and central place in our lives, you know, we're not going to have any problems. If we see it as a, you know, quote unquote, as one priest I know says, as a liturgical Pez dispenser, you know, I'm going to push the button when I want something, and other than that, I'm just going to leave it alone. Well, what do you do with that, right?
Yeah. Я думаю, отче, це вже година наша презентація була сьогодні ваша. Дуже приємно було вас почути. Дякую всім, хто зміг бути з нами. Thank you to all who was with us. We will finish it because we're trying to keep it in 1 hour, basically format. Really, I'm really would like to apologize for this, for the delay because of the technical difficulties. And it is a very pivotal discussion that we had today, especially before the Thanksgiving, to reassess, reevaluate our lives. Дякую, отче Богдане, вам щиро за все. І я вас попрошу, отче, якщо можете, проведіть нас у молитві, чи скажіть молитву благословення.
Добре. Богородиця Діво, радуйся, благодатна Марія, Господь з тобою, благословена ти в нас, і благословен плід утроби твоєї, бо ти породила спаса душ наших. І з нами Бог, його благодаті, чоловіколюбством завжди, нині повсчас і на віки віків. Дякую, Отче.
Амінь. Дякую вам, отче.
З Богом. Спаси Господи. Happy Thanksgiving.
Дякую. З Богом всім. Щасливо.